All right, guys, a lot to cover today. We got some news we're going to get out of the gate, and then Judah and I are going to have a good discussion. I'm excited for today's show, J-Dubs. I could already tell before the show what we do is we try to figure out topics we're going to talk about, do the rundown in the business, in the news business. It's called the rundown, and the rundown is like bullet points, show topics. So we were going through our rundown meeting, and we came up with a topic that has originated at the macro level. Microsoft, I would say, is a macro level topic when you're talking about Microsoft. And Microsoft, the software company, the president said there's a new era of stagnating labor pool. U.S. companies are facing a new era in which fewer people are entering the workforce, and there's pressure to pay higher salaries. Microsoft President Brad Smith told Reuters in an interview, the trend of around 5 million people expanding the U.S. working age population every 5 years since 1950 has shifted, starting in the period between 2016 and 2020 when growth slowed. So we're going to talk labor today, and I'm going to localize this topic. Judah and I will localize this topic to life in everyday America. A perfect example of this, the ABC store on West Main Street is closed now. Not permanently, we hope. Temporarily. And you know why it's closed? They can't find anyone to work there. The ABC store cannot find anybody to work there. Mm-hmm. Put that in perspective. So this topic and more, including a new restaurant coming to Stonefield. We have a bit of a reporter, a journalist or reporter desert in Charlottesville right now. With Charlotte, the fabulous reporter from Charlottesville Tomorrow now heading to the Richmond Times-Dispatch. All those topics and more on the Monday edition of the I Love CVille show. I'm super pumped for today's program. Judah Wickower, we can rock and roll when you're ready.
Quiet on the set.
Good Monday afternoon, guys. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille network, where today we're presented by Skooma Boutique Dispensary, the best dispensary in Charlottesville. Skooma Boutique Dispensary with locations on the Downtown Mall and on Ellwood Avenue. So much to cover on today's program, as we do on most Mondays, guys. We'll talk a new restaurant opening in Charlottesville. The new restaurant opening in Charlottesville has ties to the University of Richmond. That story for you on today's show. We'll talk a potential news desert that is manifesting itself in our region. What's a news desert? News, N-E-W-S. A news desert is an area that does not have many journalists or reporters covering the day-to-day happenings of the region. That's now Charlottesville. The Daily Progress has 2 reporters. The paper of record, 2 news reporters. The paper of record for Charlottesville and Central Virginia has 2, count them 2 news reporters. And folks, over the weekend, actually late last week, Charlotte Woods, the fabulous reporter from Charlottesville Tomorrow, announced that she is leaving Charlottesville Tomorrow to take a politics reporter job with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. First, I congratulate Charlotte Woods for getting a job at the Richmond Times-Dispatch. There was at one point in my life, when I was fresh out of the University of Virginia, in my mid-20s, and I was one of the youngest editors in the history of the Daily Progress, where my goal was to climb the print ladder to the Richmond Times-Dispatch. So Charlotte Woods, who is a fabulous politics reporter, government reporter for Charlottesville Tomorrow, the nonprofit news website, announced on 3 days ago that after 3.5 years at Charlottesville Tomorrow, she's excited to announce that she's going to join the Richmond Times-Dispatch team as the new state politics reporter. Folks, The CVO Weekly has a new editor that's completely new to Charlottesville. Charlottesville Tomorrow just lost arguably their most experienced reporter, 3.5 years on the job. They hired a managing editor that's new to the area. The Daily Progress has 2 news reporters covering the region. NBC 29 and CBS 19 are getting younger and younger and younger to save money with their reporters, hiring people fresh out of college with not a lot of experience covering the region. We are turning into a news desert in Central Virginia. That topic on today's show. We will also chitter-chatter Doma Korean Kitchen on today's program. So a lot to cover. I'd like to welcome Judah Wickower to the program on a 2-shot. Judah Wickower is the fabulous director of the show. My friend, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. You and I both were intrigued by this headline. Microsoft, the president of Microsoft is Brad Smith. And Brad Smith told Reuters in an interview that companies are facing a new era in which fewer people are entering the workforce. And the fewer people entering the workforce are demanding or expecting higher salaries than ever before.
Yeah.
We have a macro topic, a global topic, really. And we're going to localize it to Charlottesville. The ABC store on West Main Street is closed right now. And the reason the ABC store on West Main Street is closed is it cannot find labor to man the store. So because it's closed, because it can't find labor, this monopoly, this Virginia monopoly, said, let's just close this store for temporary purposes until the labor issue picks up. I'm not so sure it will.
I mean, I'm sure everybody's been seeing this at a lot of different places, and yeah, I don't know if it will.
All right, so let's take a deep dive here. Let's go straight into it. I want you to give your initial take here. You have a very intriguing take. What's your take on all this? Let's take a deep dive right now. Go.
My take is that our government is pricing people out of working. I mean,
what does that mean?
That means, look, I'm not saying that every employer should be paying $25 an hour. We all know that's absurd. It doesn't work that way.
Well, the employer can't afford it.
Yeah, you can't just say, okay, the new minimum wage is X and expect.
So every $10 an hour earned is $20,000 in salary. So $10, $20K. $15 an hour, $30,000. $20 an hour, $40K. Puts a little perspective for the viewers and listeners. Go ahead, Judah.
So, with I know some people. I know the news will tell you that inflation was caused by Putin or the war,
supply chain, labor, all that jazz.
But come on, inflation has been a constant for I don't know how many decades.
Not at this clip.
No,
to your point,
definitely not at this clip, but it has been constant. Prices have been going up due to inflation for a long time. And I think most of us are aware that that pay hasn't kept up. We've seen, higher cost of houses, higher cost of everything, and we all know that our pay raises and minimum wage have not been keeping up. The problem is you can't just keep raising minimum wage. You can't just keep the problem is that they've been printing money. Our government has the Fed has basically been, I think, the originator of most of the inflation that we see. And we've been shipping it around the world and causing the same thing to happen around the world. Now it's gotten to the point where, what are you going to do if a job that's above minimum wage can't even afford you rent and food and gas and the basics? What do? Do do you keep working that job and going further into debt? I mean, I don't know what the answer is.
And to
But
Judah's point,
it
go ahead.
doesn't seem logical to keep pretending that everything is hunky-dory.
To Judah's point, the trend of around 5 million people expanding the U.S. working age population every 5 years since 1950 has shifted. That shift started in 2016. Now that trend has dropped from 5 million expanding the U.S. workforce population every 5 years. That number's down to 2 million. And let's talk about what workforce expansion means. Workforce expansion means someone starts to mature, they go from high school into the workforce. They graduate from college into the workforce. That's what workforce expansion means. Kids become teenagers and they get a job. Teenagers become young adults and they get a job. College students become 23, 24-year-olds with student loan debt and they get a job to help cover the costs. So traditionally, every 5 years, the American workforce expanded by 5 million people. That number is now dropping, and it's dropped to 2 million people. So as people age out of the workforce, retirement, they can't do the same physical, take my father-in-law. My father-in-law, an amazing, amazing, amazing man, a mechanic, Mercedes-Benz mechanic. Mercedes-Benz mechanics are top-of-the-line mechanics. A Mercedes-Benz mechanic is a 6-figure job. You are significant licensing and certifications. People want that job, okay? So my father-in-law, phenomenal guy, Mercedes-Benz mechanic. When you reach a certain point of your life from an age standpoint, being able to lift tires and putting them on a car becomes very difficult and arduous. And eventually, in this example, your body says you can't be doing this kind of work anymore. So you choose to retire. And maybe you go from that mechanic 100K job to working in the parts department, in the customer service department, at the window when you're interacting with people, where it's at a much lower clip, a lower pay structure. So traditionally, every 5 years, the workforce in the United States gets an additional 5 million people. Now, the workforce is getting about 2 million people every 5 years. So it's a supply and demand thing. What happens when less people are going into the workforce? What can they do? What do they have, Judah?
Less people are going into the workforce. I mean,
It starts with an L. If there's less people in the workforce, what do the people in the workforce have with their employers that they did not have when there was a lot more people?
leverage.
They have leverage. And what do they do with that leverage?
They push for higher pay.
Higher pay and more perks.
Yeah.
And then what's the small business have to do? The owner of the small business.
I don't know. They've got to figure out how to make things work.
They
They've got to
either
raise
have
prices or they need to cut back on staff.
There we go. So if you're the small business owner, you have a couple of choices. You either go make more, figure out a way to go make more money. And that's not easy. Just figuring out a way to go make more money, especially in a recession. That's option one. Option two, pass on the additional cost to the customers. Clients, customers. My staff needs more money, I'm charging you more. The problem with that is you reach a ceiling.
Yeah.
Eventually the client's like,
Diminishing returns.
yeah, eventually the client's like, no way, dude,
Yeah.
we're not going to pay that. And guess what happens? The client goes away
Then you're back where you started.
and you're back where you're starting. Option 4 is to hire less staff. And when you hire less staff, you're shrinking the economy because you're creating less jobs.
Not to mention your customer service is probably going to go down.
Quality of life for everyone at the shop goes down because everyone's overworked. This is the predicament Main Street, the mom and pops are in. And if there's any saving grace, and I don't think this is saving grace, maybe it's just perspective, Microsoft is dealing with this right now. The president of Microsoft just pointed out that he is literally dealing with this right now. Brad Smith's the president of Microsoft. So let's have the discussion we had before the show about the two-parent household in the workforce. Anyway, you start, because I thought you made some excellent points before the show. Anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, as we've talked about before, 50, 60 years ago, you could, because of how much the dollar was worth, you could work a single job. Your wife could stay home with the kids.
Or husband.
Or husband.
Yeah.
And you could afford all the necessities of life. You could pay your mortgage. You could pay your car loans, pay for gas, pay for food. You could go on vacations. And as the value of the dollar has dropped, we've gotten to the point where, it started to become a, with some exceptions, there are some people that make enough money that they can still live that way. But a lot of us are living in a world where both parents have to work in order to afford the house, the car, the food, the vacations, and everything else. But I think we're seeing that flip. We're seeing a change where people are looking at how much stuff costs and saying, okay, one of it, if we can cut down on gas,
maybe we don't go on a vacation.
If we can not pay for childcare because one of us stays home, then we'll eat the loss of that extra income because it's just not financially viable anymore.
Okay, let me jump in on there and then go back to you. Hold that thought. Mm-hmm. I'm a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
My wife stays home. She is the bedrock of our family, foundation of our family. And we made the decision, and she's got a finance degree from UConn. My wife worked at, and I'm so proud of her for so many things, and I'm certainly proud of this. She worked at arguably one of the most prestigious hedge funds in the world, Blackstone, in Manhattan. She got her foot in the door as an admin. And after getting her foot in the door as an admin, she started working her way up the professional totem pole at Blackstone. And she was making bank. We're talking 6 figures plus. Now it's relative because it's Manhattan. Interestingly, when she was making 6 figures plus, she still had 3 roommates in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures of her apartment in Manhattan, and it was very utilitarian. We'll leave it like that because I don't want to offend my wife. Very utilitarian. So 6 figures in Manhattan, you think about it, you see it on paper, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
She had 3 roommates.
Mm-hmm.
One of the roommates had one of those fake walls in the apartment where they put up the fake wall to create another room to help spread out the cost of rent.
Yeah.
That puts in perspective what $110K in Manhattan gets you. Okay? So we made the decision of the family, I'm about to pass the baton to you, back to you, and I'm grateful for her because it takes a lot of pride, sucking up of pride, especially when you're almost at the professional pinnacle Blackstone hedge fund, to say, I have a finance degree from UConn. I worked at Blackstone where I had to bust my ass to get in the door. I started as an admin. They saw how good I was, climbed up the ladder to other positions, got promotions. And now I'm at home with a 4-year-old, and we love our son, but he's a handful. Anyone that spent an entire day, and we only have one. Katie Pearl, who watches this show all the time, I think has 5. Okay? We only have one. You spend a day with a 4-year-old, at the end of the day, you need a double bourbon and a beer to chase it. I'm serious, Judah. Mm-hmm. It's like that. It's like you're constantly on. Her job is harder than my job. We made the decision for her to stay home. Fortunately, she said yes. Because if she was to get a job here in Charlottesville, especially after being out of the workforce for a little bit, what she would earn would likely not cover the costs. I mean, it would. It would cover the cost of childcare, but she would be working for childcare. Yeah. So the decision was made, wouldn't we want our child to be taken care of in a one-on-one setting by my wife, our son's mother, as opposed to going to a daycare facility where it's more of just babysitting and there's 20 other kids in there.
Yeah.
The baton is passed back to you, sir.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of families are looking at things like this. Not to mention we've got declining population growth. Used to be, 20, 30 years ago, people thought we were going to eventually start dealing with too much population on the planet Earth, but it started to slow. It's been slowing for the last few years, and yes, now we have less people coming into the market, and the problem is not going away, and it's never going to. And as long as the Fed keeps printing money like it's going out of style, inflation is not going to be transitory.
Oh, we're past that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're well past that point. The question is, how long does it linger? How much longer does it linger?
Well, the problem is when have we ever had negative inflation numbers? I don't know the answer to that.
Does anyone know the answer to that? When have we ever had negative? How can you have negative inflation number?
I don't know.
When for a year? Does anyone have the answer to that? Let's go to comments. Man, comments are coming in fast and furious. Kevin Yancey in Waynesboro, 30, 40 years ago, one person working a 40-hour job could support a family. Now 2 people working 2 jobs because they can't get full-time work with benefits. And he says capitalism has made profit at all costs more important than someone to facilitate the movement of product. A lot of truth to that, Kevin Yancey.
I wouldn't place all the blame on capitalism, though. I think our government has
should any of the blame be placed on capitalism?
Capitalism is not a person or an
It's not
organization.
an entity. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
I would say it's a mindset.
And at its core, I don't think it's fundamentally broken.
No.
But our government and our way of life, especially here in America, has made it. The rules and regulations that have been put out and put forth the people that decide on those things are basically deciding on what works best for the people that are giving them the most money.
Elon Musk quoted in the article and says the birth rates are too low to sustain the United States of America. Exact words from Elon Musk. Interestingly, Elon Musk is contributing to the to the population of the workforce population. Elon Musk has fathered 10 children.
Yep.
Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has fathered 10 children. Look it up.
And
By a handful
somehow I doubt
of
that's,
different women.
for altruistic reasons.
A handful. No, I don't think Elon is enjoying himself for philanthropic reasons of improving the workforce population.
Yeah.
10 children by multiple women, including one, a subordinate of his at one of his companies. So what do? Where do you go? And is the solution just innovate and technology? We have a workforce shortage. Normally every 5 years, the American workforce grows by 5 million people. 5 million additional people in the workforce every 5 years. That number's down to 2 million. The reason that number is down to 2 million is because what Judah just outlined. Salaries are not keeping up with inflation. Men and women were scared during the pandemic and changed their habits and how they go about living. Childcare, speaking firsthand, is expensive as all get out, and eventually the burden is going to fall on a parent to alleviate the cost of childcare. And unfortunately, that burden is falling on women at a much greater frequency than men.
We also had deaths during COVID.
Pandemic deaths.
We also had, I think, a vacuum opening up in the work market, because if you think about it, all these people that couldn't work for a year or longer, they didn't just sit around at home and mope. They went out and they
Figured out a new skill.
They started new things. They took classes. They learned.
Went into business for themselves.
So now you have people who retired. I'm sure a lot of them retired early and are like, okay, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I might as well just get out of the workforce now. So then you had all these people moving up a rank, filling up spaces above them, and then you had people in the lowest tier, the like food and beverage industry, the retail industry, learning new skills because they weren't allowed to go to work. Now we come back to work, and surprise, there's a void to fill.
Put it in perspective, guys. During the pandemic, 2 years of our lives, grocery stores were essential. Restaurants were not.
Mm-hmm.
If you were if you were a server at a restaurant, and in the pandemic, the government deems your employer unessential, what are you going to do? You're going to find a new career. Guess who was hiring? Wegmans. Guess who had better schedule? More perks, better bennies, less stress. Wegmans.
Well, they didn't all go to Wegmans.
I mean, Wegmans, it's a small example.
Yeah.
Small example, Charlottesville. I heard from a restaurateur in Charlottesville, friend of the program, I won't utilize his name, but friend of the program, established restaurateur that many in this community know. He called it the Wegmans effect. Wegmans took the A and B players, the A and B talent from restaurants. And then the restaurants were left with the C, D, and F talent and the newbies.
That's if they managed to stay alive, after a year or more of not being able to serve people sitting in seats.
Trevor, welcome to the program. We love when you watch the show, Trevor. So what's the solution? I hate to say this. The solution is technology. The solution is going to be digital kiosks.
That may be
like you see at McDonald's.
That may be the solution for businesses keeping open, but that's not going to help anyone.
How so? It's going to help the business owner if he can afford it or she can afford it.
Yeah.
How's that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but imagine when that becomes widespread and more, we're going to tip the scale in the exact opposite direction, where those jobs that do work as opening, your first job, like McDonald's. Nobody wants to work at McDonald's, but it's a great job for a high school student or someone just out of high school who just needs
a job.
Yeah, to make some money. And they need a first job. They need income, and they need something to work to act as a stepping stone to their next job. We're always going to need those types of jobs. But if you say, look, you don't want to work now, we're gonna make your job title obsolete, where does that leave us? Yes, McDonald's will have a robot flipping burgers. Great.
You saw the robot at Three Notch Brewing Company in Charlottesville taking food to tables from the open kitchen. A food runner at Three Notch, a robot. You saw that.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain jobs that if you can't fill, why not fill with technology?
Right.
But you're saying the collateral damage of that is eventually those jobs will completely go away. So that entry position, that food runner, cashier position, where you learn showing up to work on time, work ethic, following the rules of the boss, playing as a team in a professional setting, those skills that are essential to life, if the robot takes those jobs over, you're saying it's damning the impact it's going to have on the next generation of children.
It may solve the problem for the business, but it doesn't solve the problem that we're increasingly getting to a point where it's just not cost effective to work.
Travis Hackworth, that is well said. Travis Hackworth is watching in Danville, Virginia. Anybody watching this program, Travis, we need to get Danville, Virginia as a presenting sponsor of this show. Anyone watching this program, if you want a good trip, go to Danville. Spend a week in Danville. It's going to be affordable. It's going to be pleasant. It's going to be a hell of a vacation for you. Travis Hackworth says this: if you can repeat it, you can automate it. And so many of these openings, not so many, a lot of these openings are repeatable. And if you can repeat it, you can automate it.
Mm-hmm. But again, that may solve the problem for the business, but it doesn't solve the underlying issue.
This is an interesting comment from Kevin Yancey. Kevin Yancey said, Kevin, you're a smart man. Think about all the cars that are American made that are over $100,000 in asking price. Here's what he said. General Motors, GM, currently has 5 or 6 vehicles besides the Corvette at $100,000 or more from an asking price standpoint. Chrysler has 3 vehicles of $100,000 or more with an asking price. And he makes this comment. You take away the Pontiacs, the Mercurys, and the Oldsmobiles, discontinued makes and models. You shutter 2 to 5 brands, and it causes all other vehicles to exponentially increase in price. What is the starter home of vehicles now? You see what I'm saying? The starter home of vehicles. What is the entry point of vehicles? What is the entry point of vehicles, folks? Can someone put in the comment section, what is the entry point of a vehicle? What is the starter home for a car? Is the starter home for a car a Kia? Is that the starter home for a car?
I don't know.
Is the starter home for a car? Kevin Yancey says something used. Is it a Honda Civic?
I mean, generally it would, be something used.
What is the starter home for a car, guys? Put it in the feed. The starter home for a car, the entry point vehicle, has increased exponentially in price. And Yancey makes the point because they eradicated the entry point brands. He says the Optima, Kia, and the Toyota Corolla are the entry points for cars. I'm in agreement there. Maybe throw in a Civic, a base model Civic. Let's see what
those are pretty nice.
Let's do this. 2000, we're 22, let's say a 5-year-old car. 2017 Kia, let's play a game here. 2017 Kia Optima. What do you think the MSRP from Carvana for a 2017 Kia Optima is? I'm looking at it now.
I don't know, 12,000?
Almost $20,000.
20,000 for a 5-year-old car?
A 5-year-old 2017 Kia Optima, $19,590. You can get a 2017 Kia Optima LX with 135,000 miles on it out the door for just under $18K. So look at what's happening. The starter home market is now $400,000 plus in our area. You want to buy a home for the first time?
Good luck.
$400,000 plus. The starter car market in our area, a 5-year-old vehicle with 100,000 plus miles on it, a 2017 Kia Optima, is going to run you $18K. You want one with 37,000 miles on it, you're over $20,000. It's a house of cards. It's a house of cards.
Yeah.
And what's holding up the house of cards?
The Fed.
Some stimulus money? What's holding up the house of cards?
Not much.
Some credit cards?
Oh, that's not holding anything up.
You're saying that's going to be the reason the house of cards collapse?
It'll be part of it.
Explain. Explain.
Well, think of it like the housing bubble. It was people taking out loans that they couldn't repay. And when things get too expensive and you just can't, I mean, think about it. If you can't afford your mortgage and your car payment and food and gas and, doctor visits, and what do? What can you possibly do? You've got to borrow, whether that's taking out a loan or maxing out credit cards. And what does that lead to? That leads to a credit bubble.
James Watson watching the program, he's the king of orbit. I love James Watson. He says starter homes don't exist anymore within 30 minutes of any vibrant metro area or micro city.
Yeah, he's right.
He's right.
Who would ever be able to afford houses at these prices?
Who in their mid-20s, early 30s looking for a starter home is going to be dropping 400K plus and competing for baby boomers for that crib?
Right.
Kevin Yancey this is what I've been saying, wasn't a used car shortage. There was a shortage on used cars they could make the most money on. He's saying that it's the car manufacturers causing the shortage.
No, not the car manufacturer. He's talking about the used car sales places, and it sounds like he's suggesting that they're pushing the expensive cars.
See, I disagree. I think what he's saying is the manufacturers cut the Pontiacs, the Oldsmobiles, out of the rotation. Those were their entry points. They cut the entry points out because they only wanted to sell a higher entry point. This comment, Kevin, this is one of the best comments you have ever given in this show's history. General Motors has 5 or 6 other makes or models that are currently have an MSRP over $100,000. At one time, it used to only be the fully loaded Corvette. Now there's 5 or 6. Chrysler has 3 over 100K. And he makes the point that they cut the Pontiacs, the Mercurys, and the Oldsmobiles out. And the reason they did that is because they only wanted to sell the high dollar cars. Guys, the ABC store on West Main Street cannot stay open because they have no employees. Did you hear me? Bodo's Bagels on the UVA corner, one of the highest paying food and beverage brands in this jurisdiction, has closed multiple times on the UVA corner because it can't find labor. I've done this analysis multiple times. Say Bodo's does one Bodo's location. There's 3. 1 does 1,000 tickets per day. 1,000 times $8.50. That's a very conservative price per ticket. That's $85,000 a day in average gross sales. You take $85,000 a day, or excuse me, $8,500 per day. 8,500 times 3 stores. That's $25,500 per day in gross sales across 3 stores. $25,500 times 346 days. That's way, let's say it's 25,500 times, let's say they take 10 days off a year. There's no way in hell Bodo's takes 10 days off a year.
Doubtful.
Let's say it's 5 days. 25,500 times 360 days in a year. That's $9,180,000 a year in gross sales for Bodo's Bagels. That's a lot of dough. And still, they have to close because they can't find labor. Bodo's Bagels. Trevor says this: tax the rich and subsidize the low-level workers. No one can afford to work an entry-level job anymore. You buy that?
It's getting that way. In fact, I'm looking at a hilarious headline from CNBC posted in the anti-work subreddit that says, "The size of the millennial generation is to blame for sky-high inflation," strategist says.
One of the most absurd comments I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Not from you. That's from CNBC.
Yeah.
Run it by us again.
The size of the millennial generation is to blame for sky-high inflation, strategist says.
The fact that the millennial generation, there's not as many people in it.
And it's just one small part of a much larger problem.
But see, I don't buy it. I know you don't buy that.
Yeah, you can't blame it on millennials. And I mean, really, you would need a I don't know, you'd need an economics degree in some kind of absurd, like, making things up. There's just no way.
So the thinking is because millennial generation, there's not as much millennials as there were baby boomers. There's less workers out there. Because there's less workers out there, the workers can command more money because they're driving up salaries. That's what's leading to inflation. That's the theory. Why I don't buy that theory is this. The mom and dads, my mom and dad, your mom and dad, the parents of millennials, the reason they're having less kids is because it's freaking expensive to have kids.
Yeah.
So the boomers who had the millennials, they didn't have more kids because it was expensive when it was time to do for sexy time.
There was also less in the way of
So when it was time for, boom shika bow wow in sexy time with the baby boomers, at that time, sexy time was cut down to 2 kids, 2.2 kids. No more Brady Bunch. No more 6 kids, 5 kids, 3 kids. The boomers said it's too expensive.
There was also less in the way of birth control.
What do you mean? You're saying when the boomers were being born, there was less contraceptives than when the boomers were having kids themselves?
I'm saying we have much easier access to birth control. We've had much easier access in the last 20 years, as well as the birth control that we do have getting better.
The birth control is much more legit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the birth control is way more legit. Bill McKenzie says, unless you're Elon Musk.
That's if he's using any.
I think Musk is probably we know Musk is an egomaniac. And Musk is such an egomaniac, and I have no idea, this is just one man's assumption. Musk is such an egomaniac, I wonder if he thinks, let me create mini-me's for the betterment of the world.
I will repopulate the world.
I will procreate people based on my sperm that think and look like me and innovate and entrepreneur like me. You know he's thinking something like that. The man is such an egomaniac. You know he is. 10 kids by 3 or 4 different women. It's interesting. If there's a contradiction here. It's hypocrisy. It's absolutely hypocrisy. A football player, a basketball player, a person of color has 10 kids by 3 or 4 different women. That man is chastised, ridiculed, and described as scummy. Elon Musk is white and rich. He has 10 kids by 3 or 4 different women.
I don't know if anyone's lauding him, though.
Elon Musk walks on water with media. Elon Musk is the man who's at the frontier of space. The man who's creating underground tunnels in Los Angeles to solve the traffic problem. A man who's democratizing the internet. A man who sent Starlink to Ukraine to give Ukrainians internet. A man who's created a car so cool there's a 6-month waiting list. Tesla. Elon Musk can take a few loaves of bread and a couple fishes and feed the hundreds by the national media. You don't hear the national media talking about Musk 10 kids by 3 or 4 different women.
To be fair, he has the money to raise those kids.
Kevin Yancey made that point. He's paying the child support. That's a point by Kevin Yancey. I'll put it in perspective. Folks watching the program, Ralph Sampson. Ralph Sampson is the greatest basketball player in UVA basketball history. You know who Ralph Sampson is? Ralph Sampson's Steakhouse. The greatest basketball player in UVA basketball history, Ralph Sampson, in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Let's see if I can find how many kids he has. Personal information. Ralph Sampson. Sampson has Ralph Sampson III, who played basketball at Minnesota. Sampson's younger son, Robert, transferred to Georgia Tech after playing his first 3 seasons at East Carolina. That's two boys. He also has 4 daughters, Rachel, who graduated from Stanford University and worked at ESPN, India, who works in the modeling industry and has worked for Valentino, Prada, Tom Ford, Leah, and Anna. Leah actually lives in Charlottesville. I'm friends with her on Facebook. He has 6 kids. In 2005, Sampson pleaded guilty to owning more than $300,000 in back child support for 2 children from different mothers in Northern Virginia. In 2006, he was sentenced to 2 months in prison for mail fraud with the purchase of an SUV. So Sampson gets lambasted for having 6 kids from multiple women. Musk has 10 from...
He's getting lambasted for not paying child support.
That's the difference. I'll give you that. That's the difference. If Sampson had paid the child support, we would have never known about this, is what you're saying.
I'm saying in both of those cases, nobody is looking up to them for spreading their genes around liberally.
No one is what?
Nobody is looking up to Musk or Ralph Sampson for having lots of kids.
But my point is, he gets ripped, Musk does it. But your counterpoint is a good one. Musk is paying the child support, so there's no reason to rip him. He's just a guy that likes to sleep around.
Yeah, and nobody is looking up to them for that. Yeah, I agree. He gets off with a lot.
A lot.
But nobody's thinking, man, I'd like to be like Musk and have 10 kids.
You're okay. That's a good point. You made some good points right there. It's not going to get better. Here's why it's not going to get better. We already know the millennial generation has less people in it than the boomers. The millennial generation and the Gen Zers are after millennials, right? Do we need to go to our generational chart over there? The Gen Zers are after millennials. The millennials and the Gen Zers are the generation strapped. What's that?
It's on screen.
Is it Gen Zers after millennials?
Yeah, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha.
All right, look at the screen. Everybody look at the screen. There you're going to see the generational chart. My wife suggested that we get this chart because this topic comes up so much. Millennials, Gen Zers, Generation Alphas. We already know the millennial generation, the Gen Z generation, and the Gen Alpha generation, Judah, have less population than the Boomer generation and the Gen X generation, right?
Yeah.
So we already know, because of how expensive they are, that people are having less kids. So this predicament we're in, this labor predicament we're in, is not going to get better.
Right.
It's going to get worse. So the entrepreneur, the mom and pop, the big business, the mid-cap business, has got to innovate and figure this out. And how they innovate and figure this out is probably what Travis Hackworth said: if you can repeat it, you can automate it. Technology and robots. Mm-hmm. But the technology and robots' collateral damage is, Judah, what?
Say that again?
What is the collateral damage of entry-level positions becoming technology and robots and digital kiosks?
It's not enough jobs for people who need the entry-level job. For somebody that needs a first job, for a high school student, for someone who's immigrated into our country and needs to start somewhere. Those entry-level jobs are the place to start.
Danny O'Day, watching the program, he says millennials can't afford houses, let alone kids.
Yeah.
Danny O'Day's come on the program. He's a fantastic author. He's looking for a house himself. Kevin says, look how much it costs for boomers and Gen X to have a kid. Look how much it costs now. When my parents and your parents...
That's what I was saying.
When Big Jim and Ann were birthing kids, it was a different price point. When Big Jerry and Mary were birthing kids, it was a different price point. Jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying. 50 or 60 years ago, you could have a one-job household. and still have all of the, all the perks.
All the bells and whistles.
As time has gone on, I read something interesting that explained it in terms of going to school, and it was along the lines of 50 or 60 years ago, you could work part-time over the summer and pay for a year of college. Then 20 or 30 years ago, I think around the 90s was their number, it got to the point where you would have to work full-time through the summer in order to pay for an average. I think this was like an average year of
education,
state college. Now, you would have to work overtime to even hope to pay for a year of college, and you would also have to still be living with your parents or at somebody else's house. You'd have to have somebody else paying for your food, for your car, for your gas, and then you probably still wouldn't be able to cover the entire cost of a year of college working all summer long.
I'll put it in perspective. I went to the University of Virginia. Many who watch the program know I went to UVA. While at UVA, I worked at Ruby Tuesdays in Barracks Road. I believe Ruby Tuesdays in Barracks Road is now Chopped Salad. While working at Ruby Tuesdays in Barracks Road as a student at the University of Virginia, I was a host, a waiter, and a busboy. While working at Ruby Tuesdays, as a student at UVA, I was able to cover the cost of tuition and room and board. School and work. I was able to cover the cost of tuition and room and board at Ruby Tuesdays. There's no way in hell a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old going to work at Ruby Tuesdays or Applebee's, heck, what's the restaurant in Charlottesville that servers probably make the most tip money?
I don't know.
That's a great guess. What restaurant in Charlottesville has waiters and waitresses making the most money? C&O is a great guess.
Yeah.
Maybe Fleury.
Yeah.
Fleury, it's probably like $125 a head.
Yeah. You got to be spending bank on the meal.
I would say Fleury, C&O is a good one.
Yeah.
I would have said
Aberdeen Barn.
Aberdeen Barn's a great one because they turn the tables and there's a lot of tables in there. Yeah. Fleury doesn't do a ton of table turns.
Right.
Scott Aaronworth in Virginia Beach says Tavola. I think Tavola is a good one. However, Tavola doesn't have a lot of seats, so there's not a ton of turns, and the folks have a tendency of lingering. Yancey agrees, the Aberdeen Barn. If you're a server and you're looking to make the most bank as a waiter, what's the restaurant in this town you work at? Is it Marigold in Keswick, the new Keswick? James Watson says Moss. That's a damn good one. James Watson may have nailed Mas Tapas. Mas Tapas has a lot of seating. Well, a fair amount of seating, and they turn those seats, and the restaurant's open till 2 a.m.
Yeah, and those tapas, those individual little plates, can rack up a high score pretty darn quick.
There's not a ton of food. They taste so good, and you're ordering with friends. Before you know it, you got like 13 tapas plates.
Yeah.
On your table. And that pitcher of sangria,
oh man.
I still stand by this comment. I think the number one place for date night in Charlottesville, if you want to woo or wow your partner, is Mas Tapas. Trevor says at Mellow Mushroom, the wait staff was doing very well while he was there. Jason Burke also agrees, Mas Tapas. Danny O'Day calls Farmington. Mill Room at Boar's Head, Kevin Yancey. I will say this about Farmington and the Mill Room at Boar's Head, and in places like Glenmore and Keswick, the members are oftentimes charging the food to their accounts, and there's oftentimes a 15% discount if you're a member on food. So if you're a member of Boar's Head, if you're a member of Farmington, Glenmore, you're getting often a discount on the food you're ordering, dropping the bill 15%. I do think those are great suggestions, though, Kevin Yancey, Jason Burke, Danny O'Day, James Watson, and everyone watching the program. Say it's Mas Tapas. Say it's Mas, just for the sake of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Fleury, Mas, C&O, you make the most money there.
Yeah.
you're going to gravitate to those jobs. If you're experienced and you want perhaps a career path in this industry, and that's totally cool. Totally cool.
Yeah.
As they gravitate to these jobs become almost legacy or institutional servers. They stay sticky.
Yeah.
Like at the Downtown Grill, when the Downtown Grill was open on the downtown mall, it was the same servers.
Right.
They did not leave.
Mm-hmm. It's not an entry-level job, and the people that are working there have made it their career
They made it their career.
because they make good money.
Probably like 50, what?
I have no idea.
I have no idea either. I would anticipate if you're serving your career at Downtown Grill or Mas Tapas, that you're probably clipping 50K. Especially for the hours that you're working. Mas Tapas, those people are getting out of there at 4 in the morning. The place stays open till 2.
Yeah.
And they have to work Thursday, Friday, Saturday night because those are their busy times.
Yeah.
And holidays are their busy times because that's when people go out to places like Mas.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say you're clipping 50K if you're at a place like that and you're making a career out of this.
Yeah.
So the server that's clipping 50K in this area, what's your advice to that man or woman?
To someone that's making that much money,
As a server.
kudos, you're doing better than I am.
McKenzie says the Aberdeen Barn, the wait staff have been there for many, many years. Danny says, my brother works at Farmington and comes home with stacks of cash every night. Kevin Yancey says Tip Top has got to be up there. The folks that may be in the catbird seat in this scenario, and you're in the catbird seat. You know why you're in the catbird seat?
I do not.
Because you bought your house.
Oh, yeah.
If you hadn't purchased your house, your home,
I wouldn't be living here.
you would not be able to.
I would have left Charlottesville.
You bought your house at literally the most opportune time possible.
Yeah.
And because you bought your house before this SHIT storm happened, you fixed your overhead.
Yeah. And it's still not cheap.
I mean, you've set on the air what your mortgage is.
It's about half of what I make a month.
I mean, that's where it's at right now.
Not my mortgage, but my mortgage and HOA payments.
Yeah, in utilities, housing, overhead.
No, just mortgage and HOA is about half what I make.
What is it? Yancey says at 50K, there's nothing you can buy in Charlottesville or Albemarle County.
Yeah.
Not currently. Pre-pandemic, you could have.
Yeah, if you got in like I did.
Yeah,
And if
you did.
And if you had someone helping you.
You did. So the way you can do it is got to be fixing your overhead. Because the
If you can.
I mean,
Yeah.
you did it.
Yeah, but who knows with the economy going the way it is, how much longer I'll even be able to afford that.
Oh, come on. Stop with the doom and gloom.
I'm not doom and glooming.
That's doom and gloom.
No, I'm not even saying that I think that's going to be the case. I'm just saying that I happen to be very lucky that I'm not having to buy hundreds of dollars of groceries every week.
If you had to buy hundreds of dollars of groceries every week because you had a family, your partner would work.
Or they wouldn't, because it might be less cost effective than having somebody stay home with a kid, as we've talked about.
And if the proverbial you-know-what hit the fan, and I've said this to you many times, in fact, I've said that that's what I did with my first place, you could rent out your spot. And I know you don't want the roommate, but what you got there is another $1,800 a month waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Conservatively, what you got there is another $1,250 a month waiting to happen. Conservatively. $1,250 times 12, 15 G's. If the proverbial you-know-what hit the fan, you could easily scoop up another $15,000.
Or I could just sell it,
I wouldn't sell that.
drive across.
And what are you going to
US.
do? You sell it and buy what? You sell it, you walk away with a bag of money and buy what?
Drive around the
Live in
US.
your Ford, is it Fusion? Is that what you got? You're going to live in your Ford Fusion with Liza the dog?
I'm not saying any of those are current options, but
My advice to you, and I've said this off air, so this is not me speaking out of turn. I've said this to you many times. My advice to you, if I was in your shoes, I would have gone 1 to 5 years immediately out of the gate, renting one of my rooms to someone for $1,500 a month. I would have scooped up an extra $18,000 a year, 18,000 times 5 years. I did it for 7 years at the Villas at Southern Ridge, where I had a roommate. 18,000 times 5 years is 90 G's extra you would have made. You take that 90,000 extra, you put half against the debt service on your house, and you take the other 45K and you invest it into another property.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to get you to do that for how long?
I've had the house for 3 years.
I've been trying to get you to do that for 3 years. For 3 years. I've even showed you the proof of concept of me doing it at the first place. You got 3 years. Say you rent that, I'm going to be very conservative. I'm going to call it $1,250. That's $1,250 all day. You're already paying the utilities and water.
I know.
You go to the person and say, utilities, water, and cable included. You're already paying that. Cable's no extra cost. $1,250 times 36 months. That's $45,000. That's your down payment on the second property, Judah.
I know, Jerry.
This is what I did at the Villas of Southern Ridge. This is the down payment for the second property, $45K.
Would you want to do that today?
What do you mean? Would you want to buy something right now, a second property?
No. I'm saying, would you want to have a roommate at the age you're at now? You also have to consider that my last 3 roommates.
Yeah, they sucked. You
all
had terrible vetting skills with vetting roommates. I knew some of them. You know I did.
Yeah.
The thing is, you're a nice person, and you wanted to help some people out.
It's kind of the case in some cases, but either way, they all left owing me money.
Kevin Yancey, rent that to a doctor in residence, and you'll never see them. You know what? I have the Connect for the traveling nurses. Traveling nurses, their association guarantees the rent. They'll never default on the lease. The traveling nurse needs a space for 3 to 6 months. And because it's a short-term rental, undoubtedly you can ask $1,500 to $2,000 a month on a short-term rental.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, I'm going to ask, I just got a great text message. May I mention this on air without using your last name? I'm sending you a text. May I mention this on air without using your last name? I'm sending a text to someone watching the show. Okay, fantastic. This is from Jeff. He's listening to the show, and this just came in. Jeff is a local standout, a living legend, all-around A-plus guy in this community. His son starts UVA engineering on August 19th. The bill is $45,000 for his first year, plus $5,000 in computers. I doubt Ruby Tuesday would cover that. Times are changing. 50 G's for his son as a first year at UVA engineering. And that's before the pomp and circumstance of going out, having friends, needing a light nightlife, wanting to go to concerts, et cetera, that comes with first year.
Yeah, you definitely couldn't make that working full-time
At Ruby Tuesdays.
over the summer.
No. Well, when I was at school at UVA 2000, 2004, I couldn't make the tuition in the summer.
I know.
But
that was my point.
I could make the tuition if I worked January 1 to December 31.
Yeah.
So throughout the summer and during the school year, I could cover the cost. But to Jeff's point, That ain't happening anymore.
No.
And to Jeff's point, the server job that was helping people covering the cost of tuition, the 50K Mas Tapas jobs are not going to 18-year-old UVA students.
No, definitely not.
The 50K Aberdeen Barn jobs are not going to UVA students. First years. So, without doom and gloom, I'm going to leave you with this question. Put the generational chart back on screen. I want everyone to consider this, please. We'll leave you literally with this question. Let me know when it's on screen. And James Watson, I 100% agree with you. If you're a server, buy property if you can and fix your overhead. That's how you will get out of this. I 100% agree with you, James Watson, if you can. Is it back on screen?
Yep.
Look at the screen, 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 look at the screen. I'll leave you with this question. Millennials are having less kids than ever. Gen Zers, Gen Alphas are going to have even less kids than the millennials because the Gen Zers and the Gen Alphas will be seriously saddled with student debt and they won't be able to afford a house to buy. So we have 3 generations in America. Millennials, Gen Zers, and Gen Alphas that are declining the population. The American population is declining. The workforce population is being diminished as well. This problem will get worse, not better. And from what I gather, the only solution to the predicament is technology, robots, digital kiosks, and innovation. Judah's acknowledged the fatal flaw of that is the eradication of entry-level positions that are often utilized to help kids mature and learn teamwork and how to work in a professional setting for the first time. So your 20-year-old kid, your 18-year-old kid, your 16-year-old kid, your 22-year-old kid, he and she are not competing with other humans. They're competing against R2-D2. They're competing against kiosks and ATMs. Someone raised their hand. When's the last time you've deposited your check at a bank? Someone raise your hand. When is the last time you've gone into a bank to withdraw cash? Someone raise your hand. When is the last time you have gone into a bank to do anything? What do you do instead? You do your banking on your phone. The iPhone is replacing the teller. This iPhone has replaced the entry-level position in banking. The digital kiosk has replaced the entry-level position at fast food, the cashier. The R2-D2 food runner is replacing the human food runner. And when you start eradicating positions like that, you are left with a hiring desert for newbies. And that's where we're heading. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think I think we've got a lot of problems coming down the pipe.
So what are you doing? Are you sprinting to Guatemala?
I don't know about Guatemala, Uruguay. I hear it's good this time of year. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
You're going to Uruguay?
No, I don't know. I have heard people saying that your money goes a lot farther other places. Save up enough and you can live a comfortable life in another country.
Sounds like Judah's going to Colombia.
Yeah, Colombia. I'm going to start a drug business.
The new Pablo Escobar, his name Judah Wickhauer. You did well today, my friend. Anything you want to add?
No, I think we're good.
2 other items out of the notebook. Charlotte Woods is no longer the politics reporter, or eventually will become the state politics reporter at the Richmond Times-Dispatch. She currently is the government reporter at Charlottesville Tomorrow. She's fantastically talented. The Daily Progress, she's come on the show.
Yeah.
The Daily Progress has 2 news reporters covering Central Virginia. Charlotte Woods is about to go to the Richmond Times-Dispatch to be the new state politics reporter. We're turning into a news desert here. Second piece of news before I get out of here, the ABC store on West Main has closed because of labor issues. We don't know if that's permanent. And lastly, there's a restaurant coming to Stonefield, Organic Crush. It's opening in in fact, it has opened in Stonefield. And that's a product, Organic Crush. It's a chain, has locations in Short Pump, now in Charlottesville, and some in New York. Organic Crush was started by a University of Richmond alumni. Her name is Michelle Walrath. So University of Richmond alumni, one of her brand is opening in Stonefield. So props to her. And then lastly, I'm going to get out of here on this note. My wife and my son and I had a family dinner at Doma Korean Kitchen on West Main Street. Guys, Doma Korean Kitchen is the truth. It is the absolute truth. If you want a flavor profile that you have not experienced in some time, if not ever, Doma Korean Kitchen. I butcher this. Maybe you can help me out here, Judah. Mm-hmm. I got the Dole Salt Bibimbap. Did I say that right?
Bibimbap sounds right.
I got the Dole Salt Bibimbap. The dish featured rice topped with onion, carrot, shiitake mushroom, bean sprout, zucchini, kale, sunny side egg, and spicy gochujang sauce. It was one of the best meals I've had in a long time. He's Judah, I'm Jerry, and this is the I Love CVille show on a Monday. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, guys.